Hello, everyone. This is Andrew Stevens, and author of Cycle of the Awakening. And welcome to the fourth iteration of my indie author interview series, where we talk to a handful of indie authors who've been doing this for a little bit longer than I have, and just going back to the beginning, seeing what things were like for them. Yeah, so today I have the honor of talking to D.L. Jennings. Hello, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And we had kind of an interesting introduction to each other at a local book fair here in Colorado Springs. Both served in the Air Force, and so yeah, it was kind of a chance meeting, but it's been fun to get to know you. So let's get to know you a little bit more. But first, just tell us who you are, a little bit about your books and what you write.
Absolutely. So I am DL Jennings, and I spent 14 years on active duty in the Air Force. I started off as a Korean linguist, and when I found out it wasn't quite the right career field for me, I cross-trained into what's called Airborne ISR operator. Basically, it's a fancy way of saying I helped guys on the ground while I was in a plane. And there's a whole bunch of classified stuff that goes into it, but pretty much what it means for me is I did a whole lot of deployments to different combat areas, Afghanistan, Iraq, some parts of Africa. And it was on one of those deployments when I was forward deployed to Kenya. I brought with me my iPad and a copy of Robert Jordan's The Eye of the World. And I started writing what would become my first novel, Gift of the Shaper, which is an epic fantasy about a war between gods and mortals where a young blacksmith comes into possession of an artifact that could either destroy the world or rebuild it. But the only thing is, he's got no idea. So there's gods after this thing. There's clashing of, battles. There's huge wars. There's magic and lots of found family. And basically, people have described it as like a classic fantasy feel. So, basically like your hero's journey.
Hell yeah. Sweet. Well, that was pretty cool. I think a lot of people, one thing I was kind of interested in, because I know a lot of people, I think if they know you, they've probably heard your kind of origin story, so to speak, which you just summarize in a very brief nutshell. But so that'll be kind of interesting to go through these questions and see if we can find some things that people might not already know.
I love it.
But yeah, so you already said you were on an airplane when you first wrote the first draft of Gift of the Shaper.
Mm-hmm.
But what was it that kind of like sparked that idea, that sparked that drive to write in general?
So I love to tell the story because when I was researching it, I found that there's actually a term for it, and that term is called profound boredom. Believe it or not, it is a real psychology term. And essentially what had happened was I was on that deployment to Africa, very minimally manned, what they call like an austere location. I think there was maybe about 30 of us or something like that, counting support and all that stuff. Very, very, very small base, not a whole lot to do. So for me, it was basically like, get up on days where we weren't flying a mission. It was like, get up, go to the gym, eat my food, and then, play Candy Crush for like the next 12 hours or something like that. And I was like, I got 2 months of this left for this forward deployment. Like, there's no way that I'm going to keep my sanity if I'm just like, playing video games all the time. So for me, it was very much a, what else can I do? I realized like I grew up reading J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. And for me, it was just a drive to do something. I felt like I had some time on my hands, and I was like, I had by that time I think I had finished. I'd finished my college degree, so I got in a bachelor's at some point, and I was like, well, what else can I do? I have this time on my hands, and it literally there was like a seed that was planted. Um, and Stephen King actually is the one who gives the advice of just write. And I took that to heart, and I sat down and I started writing. I didn't know where my story was going to go. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't even really know the characters. But when I sat down and started typing on that iPad, the ideas just kind of came to me, and the world sort of took shape from there.
Sweet. That's pretty cool. I mean, I've talked to, like I said, a few different authors now and how they all kind of got started. And it's all different, but it's all like, just that you would think, somebody has an idea or, it could come from anywhere, and just extreme boredom is like one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, what can I do with this time and what interests do I have? And you never know where it might lead. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
So you said that the idea just kind of came to you. So where did Gift of the Shaper kind of become Gift of the Shaper? And were there any kind of like seed ideas, or was it literally just whatever flowed out on the page at the time?
Yeah, it really was. I told myself that, I grew up reading fantasy and science fiction. So I knew that I wanted to write in one of those genres. I just wasn't sure which. And to me, I was like, I reasoned this out in my head. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to write science fiction, I have to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I do not know what I'm talking about. I'm not a very sciencey person. So I was like, well, fantasy, there's no rules. You can just make it all up. So I am the author of my world. I control the science and, the magic system and everything like that. So that was literally the reason that I chose fantasy. I was like, I don't know, it seems pretty easy. And it was so funny because so the first, let's see, I think I have, yes, I do. I have the original copy. This is the original artwork for Gift of the Shaper. This is a hammer on here, as you can clearly see. And that was also a coincidence, like just something that came to me and I made it up, because this again, like, reasoned this out. I was like, okay, well, my main character has to have some sort of like an occupation. I was like, the only occupations that I really know about in fantasy novels are farmer and blacksmith. And I was like, blacksmith seems like it'd be more fun and give me possibilities. So literally, like, this was an accident. This could have been a pitchfork. And I was like, and this the hammer that's on there became central to my story. It ended up becoming one of the artifacts of creation. It's called the Hammer of the World Forge, and it plays into the religion of my world. So it's this, when I say I made this up, I completely made this up, and it was just different turns that were taking me down different paths. This could have been a very different book had I decided that Thornton Woods was going to be a farmer instead.
Oh yeah. Nice. Yeah, it's cool how, like, you get those ideas and then things just kind of evolve from there, and you're like, this is, once you got that idea, man, it's exciting.
It is. That's my favorite part about storytelling, is just, I sort of set my I like wind my characters up and let them go.
Nice.
They're little wind-up toys to me, and I almost never have any idea where they're going to take me, which is, for me as a reader, those kind of books that take me by surprise are my favorites. And as a writer, I love it when my characters do that for me too.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, that's fun. So good segue. Speaking of characters, where did those kind of just accident, or did you kind of pull from inspiration from anywhere to come up with your characters?
Well, Thornton and Olson Woods, the father and son, were actually the names of two characters that I had in a story I'd started, I don't know, a couple years before that never came anything of it. It was a totally different story where it was like very much religious based, like angels and demons, that kind of thing. Urban, not even urban fantasy. I don't know what you call it, but so I had the name Olson and Thornton Woods, and I plucked it from that story and dropped it into Gift of the Shaper. And Thornton was essentially me. Like when I was, in my 20s, I started writing this. I started sort of pecking this book out. And essentially, like Olson Woods is pretty much like he's not necessarily my dad, but he is the fantasy version of me, and that guy's father. So some of my favorite characters and some of the characters that I think have the most depth to them are based off people I know. And when I say that, I mean their mannerisms, their speech patterns, the way they interact with the world physically. I very much describe myself as a stenographer when I say I'm writing, because I'm just sitting back and I'm watching the scene take place, kind of up here. So I'm seeing how the character would pick something up, or cross his arms, or lean against the wall, or scratch his beard, or something like that. So those are all things that I'm watching unfold to help give life to the scene, and I feel like it really is an effective way for me to write.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's always another interesting one to hear, because everybody has different ideas or different inspirations for their characters. So it's always kind of fascinating to find out, like, is it based on real people, or you just totally, I don't know, make it up? And that's, either way is cool, but interesting. All right. So when did you publish your first book? Because you kind of were talking about like what stage of life you were in when you did it, but how long ago was that, and where were you kind of at with like your military career and stuff?
I was, believe it or not, on another deployment to Africa when I found out that Indigo River wanted to publish Gift of the Shaper. So I remember I finished writing it sometime around maybe 2015, maybe early 2016. And I got to my my deployment site in Niamey, Niger, which is just on the edge of the Sahara, on the southern edge of the Sahara Desert. And I finished the book, and I was doing queries. I was sending out query letters to agents, publishers, anyone who would listen to me. And Indigo River got back to me, and I remember it was a couple months long process, but they said, hey, we'd love to meet you. Can we do like a Skype call or something like that? So sure enough, I was, we were wearing civvies. So I had my collared shirt that I would wear, to anytime I needed to blend in. And so I put that on, I was in the middle of this, like it was a plywood room, like I'm sure you're familiar with those. Anyone who's done a deployment knows the phone rooms. So like, where are you and what are you doing? And I was like, I can't tell you, and I can't tell you. So it was a lot of fun though, and I signed my first book deal in December of 2016, and Gift of the Shaper was published in February of 2018. And then later that year in October, I separated from the military.
Wow. Sweet.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, nice timing. That's a nice, like, hey, I know what I'm going to do now, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's taken me a couple years to finally to finally get here, but I am a full-time author now, which is incredibly cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Goals. Hashtag goals. I'll say that.
Hell yeah, man. You know it.
So so the idea to write the book, it kind of just, came out of boredom. But like when you were actually writing the book, because writing a book from start to finish is no small task, and we've all heard the stats of people who actually write a full book. So like what kind of feelings were going through your head as you wrote that book?
I was very unsure of myself, but knowing that I grew up reading good fantasy and good stories, I was a voracious reader. I loved to read as a kid. And I really think that set me up to be a good writer. I had the idea of what it meant to, develop a story arc, to develop a character, tell a story from start to finish. So I was extremely nervous that my writing would be bad, that people wouldn't like it. But I had a friend, her name was Nicole, and I actually thank her very first in the acknowledgments because she used to work for a publisher. She was doing some editing and everything like that. And she and I had been friends. We met at a church youth group when we were like 14 years old. And, here, 20 something years later, almost 20 something years later, we still kept in touch. And I was like, hey, would you mind taking a look at what I've written? And, I sent her like first 4 chapters or something like that. And she turned around and she was like, Dave, this is really good. And
Nice.
that moment right there was what spurred me on to complete writing Gift of the Shaper. And I knew right when she said that, I was like, I have to do this now. I have to finish this story. And sure enough, it took me almost 1.5 years, maybe 2 years to write, but by God, I did it.
Yeah, it's a challenge in and of itself, but that is cool to have that kind of inspiration to go back to keep you motivated and everything.
Yeah.
And so, through that process of year and a half that you just said, what kind of was that like for you? Did it take a time to kind of get the rhythm down and figure out like pacing and all that stuff?
It did. And there was a lot of, I remember spending so much time just like in my room on my iPad by myself, reading my notes that I'd left myself about possible story arcs and like where this was going to go, what sort of conflicts would come up. But it all just boiled down to my love of stories and my love of telling stories, which came directly from that. And it was something that I would go back to time and time again. I would think, what's something interesting that could happen here? What is a twist that might happen? Sometimes I wouldn't really consciously think those things, but I remember there's a feeling that I'd have when I'm writing a scene and I'm coming up to this predetermined point that I'd had. I was like, okay, X is gonna happen right here. And my character comes up to it and says, well, what if we do Y instead? And I'm like, oh my God, this changes everything, right? And all this groundwork that I've laid sometimes has to be, torn up and rebuilt. But every time that has happened, I feel like it has made my story better. And those twists and turns that your characters and your novel can take by extension, to me has always been really fascinating. And just the best part about telling a story is that it can be anything that you want it to be.
Yeah, it is fun. Like I'm an outliner and I like to plan. Like I like to know where I'm going. But each chapter I pants it pretty much. Like I have a general idea, but I pants it, and it always changes and evolves. And it's you get those like shower inspirations, and you're like, oh my God, that has to happen.
I have so many dictated voice memos from me being in the shower
Nice.
because I can't type and I'm like, and I
Yeah.
just babble into my phone and I'm like, write this down. And, I'd say 60% of them I actually end up using. And, it's good because, you're spinning your wheels sometimes. I just finished back in April of 25. I finished writing my newest novel, which is Dreams of Blood and Shadow. And it's going to be an Aztec inspired fantasy. And, there were days when I would not write anything because I was like, I don't know where to go next now. And I would sit down and I'd be like, all right, these pieces are here. It needs to go here. What can we do, to get these pieces here? Or what can I add to this character to make him more interesting? And a lot of those light bulb moments, came to me in the shower or in the gym. And I was like, oh, I'm writing that down. And sure enough, when I get back into my room, I pull out my laptop and I just blast out, all the words that had been waiting to spill out. So it feels really good when you can kind of get that momentum.
Nice. Yeah. 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 I've had a lot of good thoughts on like walks as well. Like that, something about like exercise and activity, man, it gets your brain going.
Absolutely. 100%.
All right. So, yeah, going down, eh? So what about editing? Because, a lot of people say, if you listen to writing advice, like editing is really where the story kind of becomes what it's meant to be. Because first drafts can be sloppy and messy, and that's okay. So for you, what was kind of like getting into editing for the first time and kind of figuring out that rhythm as well?
Gift of the Shaper, when I was writing it, I would go back a lot of times and read what I wrote. Anytime I wrote a chapter, which for me was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,500 to 2,000 words, give or take. And every time I would write a chapter, I would go back and I would go through it until I felt like every word was the correct word and everything I had meant to say had come out. The pacing was right. Because sometimes when you're writing a story, like for me, when I'm writing something, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. This is great. And it'll be a short section that, maybe it's like a fight scene or something like that. I was like, there needs to be more suspense building up to this. And I'll build that suspense. I'll draw it out, until it feels right. So believe it or not, when I finished the first draft of Gift of the Shaper, it was very similar to what is now published, because I spent so much time going over that book, making sure the pieces were fitting, making sure the story was connecting, adding in a little bits of foreshadowing. There's a great quote by, I think it was Neil Gaiman, who says like, you write the first draft and then you go back and you plant the seeds so it looks like you knew what you were doing the whole time. And it's like, and it's exactly what you do. Because everyone's like, oh my gosh, wow, how did you think of that brilliant twist? And it was like, well, I planted the seed after I had written it, and then I went back and then I wrote it into existence. So it's a lot of fun. But that's, again, like it all comes back to the art of storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. So you essentially edited as you went.
I did. Yeah. And once I had written it, again, I sat down and I just combed through the manuscript. I guess there's developmental editing and there's line editing, and I sort of did both for myself at the same time. Now, when I signed with Indigo River, they had their own team of editors to come in and do both developmental and line editing for me, which ended up, it wasn't really a painful process, again, because I'd done it myself to the point where I was like, every word in here is essential. I cut out the fat. I wanted to make sure that everything made sense. I had beta readers and everything like that. So, I was really front loading a lot of this stuff to make sure that Not only was it the best story that I could tell, but it was like, storytelling's a collaborative effort at the end of the day. And I wanted to make sure that my team of editors was going to have an easy time with it too. And, it ended up being the case, which was awesome.
Nice. Cool. So talking about Indigo Press, what was it like querying, looking for publishers? And then once you found them, how did you kind of know, and how did that publishing process go?
Well, it was very disheartening. I did get a lot of, I got a lot of form rejections. I did get the occasional actual feedback from people, which was very nice. But it was rejection after rejection after rejection. And finally, I think I had like a friend who put me on their radar and said, "Hey, this small hybrid publisher is taking on clients, and they are willing to take on your book. Why don't you give them, send them an email?" So I think, it was like I went to the website and, submitted the manuscript, like I'd done for the past 50 days, just sending out query after query after query. Thankfully, nowadays, most queries are done electronically because, believe it or not, like you used to have to snail mail your stuff and mail 100 and 400-page manuscript to somebody, and it's like I can't imagine. I know why so many people got rejected back in the days, because querying actually was a lot more difficult than it is now. But it was essentially like, once I reached out to them, they got back to me and said, we'll talk to the rest of the, the managing partners, and we're going to see, we think you're a good fit. And believe it or not, I was actually their first ever fantasy novel, which was very cool.
Oh,
so there was a big growing process. Both of us have, Indigo River and I have both, we've grown. We've done a lot of improvement over the years, which is awesome. And because I've had this great relationship with them, now again, I was querying my Dreams of Blood and Shadow, and they turned back to me and they were like, "Well, actually, we'd love to publish it under these," and then they gave me the terms of a deal, which I was like, "That's awesome." And the two of us ended up agreeing on it. And so it's actually it's a traditional deal, which is cool. They're taking on the cost themselves, and nothing from me, but they're still a small press. So I kind of consider myself to still be indie, despite the fact that I will be traditionally published. And it's a weird sort of in between, because they don't have the big money that like a Simon and Schuster or a Penguin is going to have. But even a Simon and Schuster or a Penguin, for an author that's not like Matt Dinniman, or an author whose name you don't immediately recognize, they're not going to throw as much money at you, as somebody like that. So even if I were to have landed a trad deal with like one of the big five, there's no guarantee that they would have put any advertising money behind me. At the end of the day, booksellers are looking to sell books. It's an unfortunate truth that, and this was a quote I got from Shirun J. Zhao, who is, she's, or I guess they are known for their cosplay sort of, they wrote Iron Widow, which was an amazing retelling, essentially alternate history with like Chinese mythology and mechs, right? Like Gundam, think Gundam. And Shirun J. Zhao said, they're not looking to publish books that are good. they're looking to publish books that will sell.
Yeah.
And it's a sad truth that I have had to, it's a difficult pill to swallow, but all of my advertising is done by me. So, I think that, it's something that I sort of had to, basically accept. I was like, even I see Brandon Sanderson doing his own TikToks, like he's out, he's doing it, man. It's like nobody is too big to do their own marketing. And I think a lot of newer authors think to themselves, oh, I'm going to get a trad deal and the publisher is going to do all the advertising for me. And they're in for a very rude awakening.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Sure is. All right. So let's see here. So after you got the deal, after you published Gift of the Shaper as your first book, what kind of feelings were going through your head at that point? Did you start getting reviews right away? Did it take some time for the book to get any traction? How did that go?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I am now having the best year I've ever had with it. And now I truly believe it has started getting traction. And it is no small part thanks to my presence on social media. It is not a coincidence that I've had the best year of my life with the biggest audience I've ever had in social media. Not a coincidence whatsoever. It's funny because when it first came out, I didn't know the difference between publicity and marketing, which is there's small nuances that are different. And I actually hired a publicist. And, I eventually ended up getting in, I did like a TV circuit. I did 5 cities where I went on like morning shows, talked about the book. And I didn't really see a huge spike in sales. And I was like, well, what's going on? Like, what's wrong? And, I definitely, if I could go back and do it again differently, I would. I'd do a lot more things like, I didn't pay as much attention to my website as I should have. It wasn't, I hadn't reached out to any bookstores and said, hey, would you consider carrying my book? I hadn't done any of the stuff that I'm doing now, like book conventions, and different book festivals and stuff like that. I'm the busiest I've ever been right now, and that's intentional. I say I am a full-time author, and it means, half the time is spent writing and the other half is spent promoting the stuff that I write. And it is a vicious cycle, and you got to keep going back and forth. You have to balance the two things out. And it's just, it's something that I'm really lucky that I found, because I love writing and I love doing it. It's a lot of work too.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
And talking about reviews, what was the kind of, even if the initial reception was kind of slow, what were initial reviews like? Did you look at reviews? I know different authors have different opinions about reading reviews, especially negative reviews.
Mm-hmm. Most of the stuff, obviously, like right away when you're starting out, the only people who really read your books are your family, your friends and your family. So, I was on Facebook. Like I hadn't discovered Instagram yet. TikTok wasn't even around yet. And, I was going through my friends and family. I was like, hey guys, if you like fantasy, check out my book. And, a lot of them ended up leaving reviews for me on Amazon, which was great. And almost all the earlier reviews that came out were good. And still to this day, like Gift of the Shaper gets good reviews, which makes me very happy. And it was just, it was really exciting to me when I started seeing reviews from people I didn't know.
Yeah.
And, other people, I was like, how did this person find me? Sometimes it still baffles me. I'm like, how do these people find my book? Who is talking about my book? Because I had just assumed like mine is the only opinion that's going to matter in getting Gift of the Shaper out there. But believe it or not, word of mouth is very powerful. And as a guy like Matt Dinneman will tell you, Dungeon Crawler Carl was self-published. The first 4 or 5 books in the series were self-published, and then it just caught fire, and people were talking about it. He's out there, self-published, and now I think he's gone trad, but it's like very recently, and it's arguably one of the most popular series like in the world right now. People are going crazy for it. And it started out self-published. And, I do think that word of mouth is so powerful for stuff like that. And it's hard for me to like have, set my book on a lake and pushed it out and said, all right, good luck, guy. Good luck, little buddy. Hope everyone loves you. So there is some degree of that. Yeah, there's some degree of that. But then there's stuff like this that I'm doing right now. I'm talking to other people about it. And, somebody who watches this podcast, who watches this interview is going to be like, Gift of the Shaper. I've never heard of it. Let me check it out. Oh, the reviews are good. Oh, wow, cool. And, it's just, this is a tree that I planted 8 years ago, and it's finally starting to bear fruit, and it's super exciting.
I've heard, I can't even remember where it was recently, but it was another author who's pretty successful at this point. But it's, they talk about how it's just like persistence pays off, and like it is really hard in the beginning, just getting people to know you exist and your books exist. But with that persistence, which you've clearly proved, as like keep writing, keep putting things out there, keep showing up, showing your face, showing your book, and eventually, like, people are like, they said eventually it something will happen, like it will get better. So it's nice to know that, like, even when it's hard, just keep pushing through.
And one of the things that I started doing, like that, the Colorado, I think it was called like the Colorado Springs Book Bash, right? Where we met. That was the second book event I've ever done in my entire life. The first one was, the first one was like a month or two before that in Akron, Ohio. I think I sold like 15 books, right? No idea what I was doing, never done any in-person events. And I did that one, and I was like, oh my God, I could have been doing this the whole time. This is awesome, right? I was like, why have I not been doing this? And, the number of times people's eyes have lit up when I said it is a completed series is just incredible. Like people care about that stuff, it's such a big selling point to them that they know it's, if they like book 1 enough, they can pick up books 2 and 3 right away. Like it's so important to some people.
Yeah, that is true. I that's one thing that that is difficult, I will say, for authors, is when you start out writing a series. And I've had a lot of questions about myself and my series because of that point of some people just won't pick up books if it's part of the series, it's not completed yet. So it's like, definitely, if you're an indie author watching this and you're considering writing your first book, I would highly recommend a standalone. Not saying you can't do series, but just keeping that in mind.
When I was querying Dreams of Blood and Shadow, I pitched it as standalone with series potential. And that is perhaps the best advice I can give to absolutely anybody. Everyone would love to write a trilogy, but one of the hardest truths that you can have is book 2 is going to sell fewer copies than book 1. And book 3 is probably going to sell fewer copies than book 2. And
Yeah.
this is across the board. If you look at Brandon Sanderson's, he's the best example. Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, right? Book 1 of the Stormlight Archive. It's got something like 300,000 reviews on Amazon. That's ballpark. And then you look at Words of Radiance, book 2, it's about half that.
Yeah.
And again, book 3, it's maybe 60% of that, right? So the sales are going to continue to go down. But the fact that is, people are going to look at it and they're going to say, it's a completed series. Awesome. Some of them are going to pick up all 3 books at the same time. And that's great. That's our dream. But yeah, the best advice that I would give is that if anyone is thinking about writing a new book now, standalone with series potential is the words that you should live by.
All right. Fair enough. Good advice. So you talked a little bit about the difference between marketing and publicity. So when you were kind of going through that process, how did you figure out that difference and then learn marketing along the way?
Well, I don't know if I really learned marketing, but again, as any good marketer is going to tell you, like, nobody really knows. There's tricks, sure. There's ways to sell to people, but in the end, it's just me trying to tell people, trying to connect with an audience, and figure out what is going to get them to pick up my book. And it's really interesting to me because, I have sort of, from a marketing standpoint, like I have tweaked my elevator pitch, which is basically, the refined version of what I gave you earlier in the interview. That's been, I pitch it in person. I can't hundreds and hundreds of times at different book events. And it's always very interesting to me to see the kinds of things that make people's eyes light up. Again, one of the things that I noticed right away was when I said it was a completed series, they're like, oh, and they go and they take a closer look at the book. So now that's part of my pitch in person when I'm talking to people. I'm like, it's a completed trilogy. Believe it or not, a lot of people actually care about the audiobook. When I mentioned that all the books are on Audible, they're like, oh, okay. And they'll take a picture of the cover or something. And in-person book events, the nice people will sometimes like show me their phone when they've actually bought the Audible version. I'm like, you didn't have to do that, but thank you. I appreciate the extra effort for this. So, at the end of the day, it really is. It's just like, what is going to get someone to want to pick up this book, take a look at it? Is it a good cover? Is it a catchy title? Is it a neat sounding premise? Any one of those things. You can, I really believe you can pitch the most boring series to somebody and make it sound good if you're pinging on the elements that they care about.
Yeah.
So that's one of the hardest things to do is for an author to sit down and say, what makes my book marketable? What is going to stand out to people and what's going to make them pick it up? That's something that I still struggle with. But like, one of the really funny things that, again, like, this is a recent realization that I come to, is that people really seem to enjoy Olsen, the father figure. And when I started pitching it as like, there is a hot blacksmith dad in there, my sales skyrocketed. I was like, this has been here the whole time.
Yeah.
But when I turn around and I say something, oh, by the way, there's magic, there's adventure, there's big battles, there's a hot blacksmith dad, people are like, give me all three. So it's just like, really, man, I could have done this. I could have been doing this for 7 years, and it's
Live and
just
learn, man.
live and learn. Absolutely. It's a constant learning process. That's one of the most important keys.
And for you, so you showed us earlier, you had an initial cover and then you got a new cover. So was that kind of part of like trying to get more book sales, or trying to just update the cover and the appearance and all that?
Yep. Then, oh, cool. I do have the, this is the old cover, or the OG, as I like to call it. And then this is the new cover, which it's very interesting because people are really divided. So there's some people who are like, well, I like the fantasy sort of feel of the original. But for me, if you want to look at a book and immediately know what genre it is, like, this is epic fantasy, right? There's a giant castle, there's like, there's a goddess holding a hammer on the front, and it's like, okay, I think I have a pretty good idea about, what this is about. But, if you look at this, it's a hammer and an anvil, right? It's like, I'm not sure what it's about.
Yeah.
And I actually had another author reach out to me. I think it was, I made an Imager post about it, the cousin of Reddit, right? And he reached out to me, he private messaged me. He was like, would you be open to some constructive criticism? And I was like, absolutely, yes, please help me. And he said, I don't think your cover is doing you any favors in trying to sell books. And I was like, okay, noted. And that same week, I went on a quest to try and find a new cover artist for Gift of the Shaper. Interestingly enough, Jeff Brown was one of the people that I queried. This is in 2020, so this is 6 years ago. And back then, I was still, I just left the Air Force, and I was, I was an enlisted guy, so I wasn't made of money. And, I couldn't afford him, to be quite honest. And his price range was just a bit outside of what I could reasonably afford. And I was like, I will pass now, but I love your work. And the coolest thing was when I signed this deal for Dreams of Blood and Shadow, the publisher agreed that I could bring him on to do the cover for me. So we've come full circle. And now that my book is, under a traditional deal, I'm going to have Jeff Brown as my cover artist. So, dreams are starting to come true, man. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I told Jeff, I'm like, yeah, man, you are worth the price that you charge, but I'm going to have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, man. I was the exact same, brother. I was the exact same.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude's a legend. I can't wait to see that. It's going to be sick.
Very excited.
So for you, like, we've talked a lot of different stuff, learning and just kind of figuring all this stuff out. When did things kind of feel like they were starting to click for you?
They still don't, man. I mean, well, maybe not necessarily true. Maybe, about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. Honestly, it's like, I think when I was writing my fourth book, what became Dreams of Blood and Shadow, I really was like, so I was working as a DoD contractor, and again, I was doing deployments, I was going downrange and doing the jobs that not a lot of people want to do, or not a lot of people are qualified to do. And again, in my downtime, I was thinking to myself, what's the best use of my time? And if I were to leave my job right now, like if I were to leave my job in a couple months, how can I prove to myself that I can be a full-time author? So I sat down at the beginning of one of my 90-day rotations, with a fully developed outline for Dreams of Blood and Shadow. I started it in February. I finished it in April, and it's about a 91,000 words, which is, it's going to be about 300 something pages. So Gift of the Shaper was about 120,000 by way of comparison. But I proved to myself that I could sit down for 8 to 10 hours a day sometimes and crush 5,000 words a day. It ended up coming, I think I averaged maybe 2,500 words a day or something like that. Some days I wrote 0. Some days I think 6,000 words a day was my record. And I'm like, I don't know if I'll touch that again, but I was filled with the Holy Spirit or something, man. I was like, what is going on? Like, it's crazy. But that was really when I realized not only do I have what it takes to be a writer, but I have the discipline too, which is very important to me. You can have the skill. You can be you could be, Dostoevsky or Ernest Hemingway, but if you never sit down and write that novel, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's always another question that's interesting. That's really interesting for me. And it's kind of like the whole like selfish reason that I'm doing this interview series is like, looking at where I'm at now and looking at other authors who are doing it successfully, and like how long did it take them, and what's realistic expectation. And everybody's story is different. But it's definitely motivational to know, like, it doesn't have to happen right away. Like, you don't have to hit some, milestone of reviews or books written or whatever, at a certain point. It's just like, do the best that you can and keep working, like you said, the discipline. And
everyone's journey is different. Every single author's journey is going to be different. And, there's guys like, I think you interviewed Andy Peloquin earlier, right? Like, hugely successful, just crushing it, doing great with self-published. And, I had never heard of him until about 2 years ago, and I found him on Instagram. I was like, well, this guy's awesome. Wonder what he's doing, and which is, it's so interesting to me that, these people, there's authors out there who are incredibly successful, and there's somebody who's never heard of them. Like I got these John Gwynne books up on my shelf. I got, Fonda Lee back behind me. There's somebody out there, maybe even in your audience, who's listening to this right now, who's never heard of either one of those. And it blows my mind. It's like, oh, you've never heard of John Gwynne or, whatever. Nobody, like, there's some people out there who's never seen Lord of the Rings. There's, it is just, you have to find your audience and just get your book out there. It's like, I think that's really the most important thing, is just, make sure you're getting their name out there, because somebody hasn't heard of you. And, today could be the day that, your audience hears about you for the first time. So.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So we're getting close to the end here of an hour. I just want to wrap it up with a few more questions. So for you, were there any kind of big wins earlier on in your career that kind of helped propel things forward a little bit?
I think so. I submitted my books for awards all the time, and one of them is now defunct. It's called the Beverly Hills Book Award. I looked it up like a couple years ago, and I the website doesn't exist anymore, which kind of makes me sad. But that was the book that made me an award-winning author, and that was, when I was in the Air Force, I went through survival school, and it's called SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. Yeah. And one of the things they taught you in survival school was celebrate small victories. Mm-hmm. And that has been something that I really have put to practice. To this day, I will celebrate wins, big or small, because I need that encouragement to keep going. And if it wasn't for celebrating small victories like that, I don't think I'd be where I am today. Without the encouragement of friends, without the encouragement of readers. And I think like I had made the mistake of assuming that every book gets reviewed by the New York Times, like that's something that is very difficult to do. And I thought, oh, well, my book's published now. Now I can send it out to reviewers, which is not the case. You have to send your book to reviewers first before it's published, which I learned the hard way. I was like, oh, wish I would have known that. And, every time that I sent it out to a new reviewer or submitted it for a new award, any positive feedback I got was good for me. And, that was a small victory that I kind of put, notches in my belt and sort of kept going.
Nice. Okay. That's good. That's good advice as well. It's like, doesn't have to be big. Just, celebrate everything positive.
Definitely.
All right. I think we pretty much covered the majority of these questions kind of already. So we could go ahead and wrap this up. Where can people, I'll put links in the video description, of course, but where can people find you and your books?
The best place, if you want to support me directly, is through my website, dl-jennings.com. But I tell people these three things. I say, 1, through my website. 2, call up your local bookstore and have them carry it or have them order it. And number 3, whatever gets the book in your hands. Yeah. That's always the most important one for me. Because again, like, not everybody likes buying the physical copies. Some people prefer the ebook. Some people prefer the audiobook. So for me, people always ask me, oh, what's the best way that I can support you? And I always tell them, whatever gets the book in your hands, whatever method you prefer to consume the book, do that, and that's the most important thing for me, because I wrote these books so people will enjoy the story. And that's always my favorite part, when, a reader gives me feedback and says, I loved your story. This is absolutely amazing. That's why I do this, I am a full-time author now because I paved the way for myself to do this. And, I worked really hard to get to this point. And now that I'm here, I'm like, finally, I can focus on writing books and selling books and telling stories. And it's the best feeling in the entire world, for sure.
Awesome. And what about for you, for people to follow and connect with you? What are your kind of top ways for that?
I am everywhere. I'm on Instagram at DL Jennings. It's like DL.Jennings. I'm on TikTok, DL Jennings. I'm on Threads, DL Jennings. I'm even on Facebook, DL Jennings. I'm just like, keep that brand consistent across the, across the web and everything like that. So honestly, people like, I like to tell people this all the time. I'm like, Google me. I'll show up in searches and stuff like that. So, I've done the media circuit and everything like that. So my name appears in, Google searches and everything when you look me up. So definitely, if you take nothing else away from this, it's Google DL Jennings.
Sweet. All right. And for the last question, for any other like indie authors out there who might be listening, what are your like top 1 or 2 pieces of advice?
My number 1 piece of advice is write the book. People can have a million ideas for a story, and I can't count the number of times someone's come up to me and said, I got a really good idea for a story. And my advice is always, have you started writing it? My response is, have you started writing it yet? And they're like, no, well, I gotta get some details out. No, no, you don't. Start writing that book today. That is the best piece of advice that I can give you. And honestly, that pretty much would sum it up. I've written a couple articles on, I did one. It's like, so you wrote a book, now what? If you Google that plus DL Jennings, you can find the article or go to my website. And another one that I wrote is advice for younger authors, and I basically wrote this as advice to my younger self. Like, here's all the things that you need. You need reviews. You need publicity. Blah 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 blah. The best thing that I can tell a new and upcoming author, though, is write the book, because everything else takes second place.
Yeah, that is true. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here today for this awesome interview. It's fun to, like I said, talk to all these different authors and find out their kind of origin stories. And it's hopeful for me, being earlier in the game, trying to figure all this stuff out. So hopefully this was useful to other authors out there, and hopefully there's some fans who maybe heard you for the first time or just got to know you a little bit better. If that is one of you viewers right now, like and subscribe. Check out the other author interviews, like you said, Andy Peloquin, and a few other authors that I've already interviewed. Hopefully there will be more coming up. And that will be a wrap for this. So thanks, DL Jennings, and till
Thanks
next
for
time.
having me.